um, which is something new that's happening. And as we go through this conversation, I really encourage you to ask questions as it makes sense to you. Hi, Jean. Um, Never hesitate to stop me and clarify something. So, um, as a few more folks are arriving, I'm just going to get my presentation for you so that I can share my screen with you. Um, because I have a lot of information that I'd like to share. And just so you know, I will be sending out the recording as well as the presentation. So you can take a look at it again and kind of go over it if there's some pieces that sort of stood out to you and you are wanting to review. So I wanted to talk today about ideal diet. And the reason I love this topic so much is because I feel like, you know, coming to this country from Italy as a teen, I was really confused just looking around. I came to Kansas City. I didn't come to Vermont. So that was its own unique experience. But, you know, I was raised kind of in markets and in shops that were really specific to a particular food group, like the butcher shop or the vegetable shop. And going into supermarkets in the United States, I just remember saying to my mom, you know, where's the food? Where's the food? Right. And that really kind of turned me into a food advocate very early on. And it seems like a lot of folks who are immigrants to this country, whether it was in this generation or many generations ago, have to some extent lost touch with kind of their ideal diet from a traditional foodways perspective, right? We all have foods that are traditional to us and indigenous to us, essentially. And many of us have all of these different genetic strands coming in. And so it's easy to feel confused and say, well, you know, my grandfather was Welsh and Polish, and my grandmother was French. And, you know, so how do we put all of these pieces together into an ideal diet? And there's a fairly simple sort of process that I'd like to guide you through around kind of sorting this out for yourself. And I think you will come to it, and I think it'll continue changing. The other thing that's important to remember is that we may have all of these, you know, genetic threads and strands that we know about from the stories we've heard from family members. And it may be that you know, we don't carry all of those within our own DNA, right? So that's why kind of at the end of our class, I'll talk about intuitive eating, which is a way to kind of tune into your body's own cues for nourishment. And that can often help us to kind of discern um, which foods feel most resonant, and then kind of get an idea too of, okay, if this food is feeling resonant and it comes from this part of the world, I must have more DNA from that part of the world, right? Of course, there is a ton of testing out there now if you really want to figure out your specific genetic strands. 23andMe is sort of the most common one, right? And if you want to figure those out based on genes and based on nutrition, you can always take the nutrition genome test. Both of these are wonderful. Both of them are expensive. And I think that those are a great approach, right? Because they give us kind of some facts and some scientific basis about who we are. And I think we can also take the intuitive approach and reach very similar results. And so that's a little bit about what we'll be talking about today. And I just want to take a pause for a moment and see if anything is coming up for folks in terms of questions before we dive in further. Go ahead. And you should unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Melinda and I live in Burlington, Vermont. And my question was just about the moons. You said the moon was last in this position November 30th, 2020. And so does that mean the new moon that we're in right now, it was last in this position? So really?
That's right. That's right.
This position vis-a-vis the astronomical sign, or?
That's right. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So it's a new. See, we're in. Are we in Gemini yet?
That's right.
Okay. So
yes.
the new moon's right. The new moon is in Sagittarius. Oh, I see. So you're saying the last time we were in the sun sign of Sagittarius.
That's right.
So
you
it's
got
the
it.
sun and the moon you're connecting with.
You got it. Yes.
Okay, I got it. Thanks.
Thank you. Welcome, Melissa. So I will share my screen with you all. And we can dive in.
In this position.
I'm going to exit the full screen so I can. We'll still be in the room.
So as I was saying, this really is a moment to press pause when the sun is shadowed by the moon. We get to stop and take a break, which often as we get close to summer solstice, which is just 11 days away, and these days are very long, it's good to try to not overextend ourselves, because summer is when we prepare for winter. And as strange as it might seem to think about winter right now, it's important to slow down and take in the nourishment of the season. So I encourage you to just kind of land here and now. And one of my favorite ways to land is to make my exhale longer than my inhale. And what that does is it allows the nervous system to get the message that it's okay to slow down, it's okay to come into this moment, and it's okay for any fight or flight response to kind of fade into the background. So I encourage you to breathe in for 4 counts and out for 8 counts. And feel free to do that a couple more times if that felt supportive to you. And in the meantime, I will just offer gratitude to all of the teachers who've allowed me to be here with you today, sharing what I'm sharing, and teachers including chronic illness. 10 years of chronic illness has been a profound teacher for me in understanding the nature of health and the role of ancestral eating in wellness. So again, eclipses reveal what we've relegated to the shadows of our psyche. So for most of us, listening to our intuition is like trying to hear a bird song over a jackhammer, right? The world is really loud. There are a lot of distractions. There's a lot going on. You know, Even as I sit here now, I see cars driving by, people walking. I hear bird song. There are footsteps above me, other voices. There's a lot happening. It's a lot to tune in. And so I really encourage everybody to take some time today, whether it's, this afternoon or later this evening, to just take a little break and think about, what does that break look like for you? Does it look like taking a break from looking at screens, computers, and phones? Does it look like, taking a break from a certain food that you feel like you've been leaning on or eating a lot of? Does it mean taking a break from a conversation you've been having with a loved one that feels like it's on repeat? So whatever break that is, or whatever that looks like for you, I really encourage you to take a pause. And as we think about how to find our ideal diet, I think it's really essential to tune into more than just food, right? We want to think about, yes, the foods that are pre-programmed into our DNA by our ancestry to be most digestible. But we also want to think about meal rhythms and, when we're eating and what our experience of eating is like. Is it calm? Is it distracted? Is it chaotic? Is it loud? And we also want to think about our sleep. What is sleep like right now? How long is it taking you to fall asleep? How long are you staying asleep before you wake up? And then also thinking about moving our bodies. And of course, there are certain circumstances and situations that allow us to not be able to move our bodies, such as illness or injury, right? And moving, even just walking around, getting fresh air, being in the nature that we are so deeply a part of, is also really important to tuning into these cues for nourishment. So we'll be talking about sort of 3 simple steps to tracing, what your ideal foods might be. And the first step is really to promote your body's own natural capacity to heal, right? A lot of folks in the healthcare world call this detoxification. And yes, our body is incredible at detoxifying, and it goes through 2 phases of detoxification every day and every night, actually, while we sleep, which is part of why sleep is so important. And I don't often use that word because our bodies aren't toxic, right? Our bodies are just constantly processing input, whether it's food or sound or conversation or emotional input. Bodies are constantly processing. And that's the nature of reality. And the body does have this incredible natural capacity to heal itself. And we just need to sort of set up the causes and conditions that allow for the body's own healing capacity to be activated. And then the next step is really to simplify our eating. Take out foods that are highly processed or treated with antibiotics, pesticides, hormones, cleaning products and body care products that have parabens in them. And in that space, we create an opportunity to introduce some new foods and some ancestral foods. And then the way to really tune in to how these foods are resonating is that third step of practicing intuitive eating. So in terms of honoring daily rhythms, a lot of people, again, in the healthcare community talk about intermittent fasting. All that this really means is eating with the cycles of light and dark, right? So I end my last meal before sunset, and then I eat my first meal after sunrise. And in those periods in between, I don't need to eat. And ultimately, hopefully, I'm resting, right? And that gives the body this opportunity to detoxify, to access its own natural healing capacity. And then the other piece is that a lot of us do have snacks somewhat frequently, depending on our stress level, depending on our mood, depending on what's going on in our lives. And that can often cause blood glucose to be kind of on a roller coaster, right? So thinking about making sure that our bodies can go for hours or so without eating and without feeling, like shaky or anxious or angry, um, is really important. It's a really important test to see how well our body is functioning. And if you want to talk with me more about that, you're always welcome to reach out and send me an email. But kind of trying to shift a little bit towards, um, having slightly bigger meals and maybe occasionally substituting um, a snack with tea, I think would be a really great way to kind of start checking in and seeing, okay, can my body go these 4 hours and not feel like it needs food, right? And not have any of those sort of symptoms. Um, and like I said, do try to allow, a natural fasting period, obviously with exception. But for the most part, I think letting 12 hours go by between dinner and breakfast is healthy and natural for the body. And the two greatest ways I know of to really help the body um, detoxify, to promote the body's own natural capacity to heal, is to include lemon and seaweed in the diet. So a traditional Ayurvedic remedy is to put a tablespoon of lemon juice in a cup of water at room temperature and drink that on an empty stomach, whether it's first thing in the morning or in the afternoon, a couple hours after lunch. It's just a great way to help the liver to clean our blood, process our bile, and recycle it, get it ready for the next meal. It's a great endocrine system balancer, so it's a good hormone balancer. And it's really a great way of restoring the body's pH. I studied extensively with Dr. Vasant Lad at the Ayurvedic Institute in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And he talks about the overall VPAC, the overall effect of a food in the system. And even though lemon may seem acidic going down, the overall effect of it is balancing. So lemon is quite an amazing food. Also antiviral, antimicrobial, so great for immune health. And then there's seaweed, right? Seaweed truly is a longevity food. It's really high in iodine, which we need for immune health and for hormonal health. And it has a ton of vitamins and minerals. Really, eating seaweed and including it in your food is better than taking a multivitamin in many ways. So you can get dried seaweed of all kinds, chop it up with scissors, put it into your food. You can try seaweed snacks if you've ever had those or never have had those. They're delicious. And keep including these foods in your diet. Keep kind of, as you eat them, sending this message to your body. These foods are helping you do your own innate healing work. And I think these foods are great all year round. There are a few cases where I wouldn't recommend lemon and seaweed, but overall, I think they're both excellent choices. And, you know, helping our body to access its own capacity to heal is all about movement, right? Movement supports the circulatory system. It promotes lymphatic detoxification. It's helpful in so many ways. And movement is also the way that we use stored fat as energy. And so getting outside, moving around, taking a breath is a great way to use the energy that our body is already holding on to, promote its own natural capacity to heal, and support the nervous system as well. So as I was talking about a little bit with lemon, really our body's own natural capacity to heal is all about our innate immunity. And the seat of our innate immunity is in the gut. Gut bacteria produce a ton of different immune responses. And so thinking about promoting gut health is really thinking about promoting immune health, right? And our immune system is responsible for so many things, including our mood and how we're generally feeling. So as you're able to tolerate them, I really encourage you to eat probiotic foods like miso, like kimchi, sauerkraut, yogurt, whether it's animal or plant-based, and just um, notice how having a little bit of one of those foods combined with a meal, how that feels to you. You know, kind of pay attention what it's like to add in these cultured foods, and just be aware of the fact that, you know, when we take in probiotics as food, as opposed to in supplement form, our body knows what to do. It says, I'm going to take what I need and leave the rest. And I'll get a lot of soluble fermentable fiber along with those foods that'll help me to metabolize them and feed my good gut bacteria. Probiotic supplements tend to be broad spectrum, meaning they include a lot of strains that we may have depending on our gut type, and some strains that we might not have, right? So you will start to see in the next few years that probiotics are going to change and go away from this broad spectrum and more into kind of a specific strain for specific enteric types or specific gut type kind of approach. This is already happening and it's really exciting. And lo and behold, we have about 4 gut types, just like we have about 4 main blood types. And gut types do tend to follow ancestral lines. So people with prevalence or predominance of certain ancestry will have a certain gut type. So I think it's really great, you know, as we're starting to learn more about this, to remember to go back to this traditional concept of eating the lacto-fermented foods that are sort of indigenous to us. And then soluble fiber, right? Because soluble fiber allows for the fermentation of short-chain fatty acids, which is what our immune system needs to function. It needs those short-chain fatty acids to feed off of. So if any forms of soluble fiber like peas, beans, oats, carrots, apples, asparagus appeal to you and resonate to you, I definitely encourage you to include those in your diet, especially if they're ancestral to you. And then kind of in our second step, right? So we're thinking about promoting our body's own natural capacity to heal, including foods that are detoxifying and supportive like lemon and seaweed, getting outside, taking a breath, promoting innate immunity with probiotic foods and soluble fiber. Then really the next step for further healing to happen is to simplify, right? We live in a processed food culture. And that's not our fault. It's the way that it is. And unfortunately, we're victims of a government and a corporate society that makes processed food that's not very nutrient dense and fairly low quality extremely affordable. So, you know, some of you have heard me say this before, but I came from a country where people spend on average 38% of their income on food. And I moved to a country where people spend on average 8% of their income on food, right? So there's definitely kind of a mental and values-based shift that goes into eating in this particular way. And I honor that that's not totally attainable to everybody, right? Because unfortunately, in this country, high quality nutrient dense food that's free of pesticides and hormones and antibiotics is more expensive, which is totally backwards, and which is why we're a country riddled with diet-related diseases, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, autoimmune disorders, right? So many of these are related to pesticides in food, or like the gluten-free epidemic, right? It's not about gluten, it's about pesticides. So that being said, the more you can take time and space to cook food and get whole foods from the source, really the better off you are ultimately, in terms of health and longevity, and staying away from doctors' offices and medications and chronic illness. And I think, if there's one place to focus on, it's really looking at hormones and antibiotics and pesticides. 75% of the antibiotics used in this country are used in animal feeding operations. So I feel really blessed to live where I do, in Indochina, which is the Abenaki name for central Vermont. And there's a lot of really high quality animal food around here, that is raised humanely and processed well. So I think, a big place to focus in terms of simplifying and eliminating some of these toxins is with meat. If you do eat meat, and thinking about, kind of getting meat that does not have those antibiotics, hormones, pesticides in it, right? And if animals are fed grain, making sure it's grain that's organic and pesticide free. And for folks who don't eat meat, that's great. And it's, kind of another hurdle overcome. And the thing that I would then sort of focus on is looking at which fruits and vegetables do not uptake a lot of pesticides from the soil. And the Environmental Working Group has a great list, which probably many of you have heard of, right? The Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. But check it out. The Clean 15 are okay to buy conventionally, meaning often less expensive. But yeah, I really encourage you to kind of take a look at what you're taking in, not only in terms of food, but also, what you're putting on your body and what you're using to clean your home. Just thinking about ways to, get those things out of the system, because they can be the source of a lot of symptoms that you're experiencing that kind of seem, mysterious, or they don't make a lot of sense. So with all of the space that we create by simplifying, we can bring in some ancestral foods. And as we're preparing these foods, something great to think about is setting aside time to cook, right? And kind of picking and choosing your activities, knowing that, basically if we don't eat, we die. So we might as well focus a little bit more time and attention on cooking. So yeah, set aside some time and think about, even when you're cooking a meal, maybe as time allows, doing an extra food project, right? So sometimes I'll be cooking what I call a sheet pan meal, where I just put chicken and root vegetables on baking sheets in the oven, and that's, my meal. An hour later, it's done. And in the meantime, I can do something like make some crackers, or make some muffins, and have some things prepared that are snacks for my week ahead. And then cook things in advance. I think it's really helpful after I come home from food shopping to cook up most of the food that I've bought. And this might, take me a couple hours. And you can decide how long you want to spend and what makes sense. But then you have some food that's ready, that's prepared, that can be heated and enjoyed. And there isn't sort of this feeling of a need for processed and packaged and pre-made food, because you've done it yourself. You've created your own minimally processed food that's ready for you. And then the other thing about processed food, right, besides all of the additives, is that it's really high in salt, sugar, and fat. A New York Times op editor named Michael Moss wrote this amazing book called Salt, Sugar, and Fat. And it's just about how the excess quantities of these ingredients in restaurant food and packaged food is basically killing us. So the other way to get flavor is spices, right? And putting delicious spice combinations into your food. And so these are some examples of some spice combinations that I really love. I really like cumin, coriander, turmeric, and cinnamon. and that's highly anti-inflammatory, balancing to blood sugar, and antimicrobial as well. A lot of these spices actually are anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial. The power of spices is incredible, and the medicine truly is found in these spices. So play around with your own spice combinations. See if any of these resonate for you. And there's an amazing book out there called The Flavor Thesaurus. And some of you have heard me talk about this before. But The Flavor Thesaurus woke me up to ideas like sprinkling nutmeg on my avocado, because that's an incredible flavor combination. And I think that's a really fun book to explore, because you can sort of start to get a sense of how foods are changed by spices and how their energetic quality is changed. You know, like a cooling food, like an apple with cinnamon on it, becomes a little bit more warming. It's still cooling in nature, but the cinnamon makes it warmer and makes it more digestible. So these are different spice combinations to try, that I think are fun and can spice up simple, baked chicken or cooked rice, for example. And I do just want to mention, because of the time of year, that Chinese medicine explains that we're moving out of the wood season of spring, when the sap rises up into the trees, and into the fire season of summer, right? You can picture and understand and imagine how summer relates to fire. So spring awakens wood, and summer burns that down. And this is also the time when we prepare for winter, when we take in all the nourishment from the coals of that fire of spring moving into summer. So when you're feeling overheated, you can do things like drink lemon water, add cucumber to your water or your food. There's a reason that in Spain a traditional summer food is gazpacho, right? Which is primarily hot peppers, because sweating cools the body down, and then cucumbers and tomatoes, which are both very cooling. And then other cooling foods are cilantro, lime, coconut, arugula, quinoa. All of these foods represent the bitter flavor, which is the flavor that we sort of think about in Chinese medicine when we talk about summertime, and they're cooling. So don't feel like you have to suffer in the heat. You can use food as medicine. And Ayurveda, the knowledge of life from India, this other traditional nutritional philosophy, talks about how spring is the kapha season, the season of earth, and summer is the pitta season, the season of fire, right? So fire can often be aggravating, right? If you think about sitting around a bonfire, often I'll come away from that feeling thirsty. My lips will be chapped. It's nourishing to be around a fire, and it's also very drying. So summer feels so nourishing, and it can feel really drying, and really sort of aggravating. So think about, again, that calming breath that we started with. If you feel like things are ramping up, like there's too much going on in a day, think about doing this breath after you go to the bathroom, building it into something you're already doing, right? You're going to be going to the bathroom every day. We all do. And think about doing this calming breath before you leave the bathroom, and just kind of building it in so that your nervous system gets that support during these long days. So we've talked about promoting our body's own natural capacity to heal, about simplifying and getting out the foods that are highly processed or high in additives. And now we can start to sort of think about tapping into ancestral foods, right? And the more we know about our heritage and our ancestors, the more we can kind of bring these foods in. And I gave you these two websites, 196 Flavors, and Food and eAtlas, which you can just search for in your browser, because the neat thing that both of these sites explain is that we can think about, okay, my people are from Italy, and Italian people eat pasta, right? That's what everybody likes to say. Like, oh, you must eat tons of pasta then, right? No, wheat is not indigenous to Italy. So a lot of Italian people, yes, eat pasta. We're really blessed to never have allowed genetically modified organisms into our country. And we have very, very small pockets for growing food because we're dominated by two mountain ranges, the Dolomites and the Alps, north to south, and the Apennines. I'm sorry, Dolomites and Alps, east to west, Apennines, north to south. So we don't have a ton of big swaths of land for growing food, less need for pesticides when you're growing in smaller concentrations, right? So many people actually say, I can't tolerate wheat, and when I go to Europe, I digest it just fine. That's because it doesn't have pesticides in it. So certain foods in moderation can be really healing. And it's important to look at these sources because it helps you to see where specific foods actually came from. And you can look at your countries of origin and say, oh, wow, I didn't realize that this food came from this place. And these maps also show you how the foods traveled, just as we have traveled, and gives you kind of a sense of, how you can start to put together the picture of your food ancestry. And many of you know this already because you're already members, but this class is part of our online membership academy. And we talk about these sorts of things twice a month, new moon classes and full moon conversations where people can bring questions. I also offer an online resource library with a ton more information about all of these sorts of topics related to nutrition and wellness overall. And if anybody's interested in being part of the academy, I encourage you to reach out and let me know. We'd love to have you as part of the community. It's been wonderful so far. So after we kind of do this exploration of figuring out, okay, these are, sort of the places that I'm from. These are the foods that are indigenous to those places. Okay, I want to start kind of eating these foods, and start kind of introducing them one at a time. Many of them are probably foods that you already eat. So kind of bring them in with a little more consciousness, and think about, okay, this potato, this is where this food came from, right? And kind of start to slow down and tune into your intuition a little bit. Often we're doing so many things when we're eating, we're having a conversation or, thinking about what's next, or even reading a book or looking at a screen. And intuitive eating is a great way to kind of put our attention on our food and on what we're eating. And it helps us too to not really judge ourselves. It helps us to kind of appreciate everything that we eat and feel like we can send our food this message of, you're my ancestral food. You're here to support me. This is exactly what I need in this moment. And I wanted to just share these intuitive eating principles because I think they're so beautiful. So making peace with food, right? Not feeling like food has to be a fight. And that's a big part of ancestral eating too, is sort of making peace with, these are the foods of my heritage. These are the foods that are pre-programmed into me to be the most nourishing, healing, supportive ones. And then I can bring in other foods as well, right? But these ancestral foods are my foundation. So I can kind of make peace with that and feel at home with that. Exploring our hunger cues, right? So knowing we can let those 4 hours pass between meals if we need to and feel fine. And feeling what it really feels like to be hungry as opposed to feeling anxious, worried that we're not getting enough food, which also has to do with trauma. And it has to do with intergenerational trauma in terms of how we've been raised, in terms of the messages we were given about food, in terms of, I lived with 18 cousins growing up very closely and spent a ton of my time with them. And I'm the third youngest of 18. And so I often had moments of feeling like everybody was taking all the food and there wasn't going to be enough for me. And I still notice that in my eating. As it gets close to mealtime, I start to feel anxious because I start to feel like it's going to be a race to the finish line to get my food. And I just have to remind myself, okay, that's just part of my conditioning. That's a trauma response from how I grew up, and it's okay, right? And I can sort of relax and listen to my own hunger cues because there's plenty. So I think thinking about all of those kind of aspects of your own upbringing and your own life is really important as well. And then allow yourself to eat slowly enough that you can tell when you're full so that you don't overeat. And when you're feeling full, take a pause and sort of feel like, okay, I'm feeling satisfied, so that this food really lands in your body and this feeling of nourishment really comes into your body. And that truly is respect for your body. Because food is meant to be savored, food is meant to be enjoyed. Yes, it's fuel. Yes, it's energy, and it's a wonderful and joyful thing too. So savoring your food and not judging your food choices. I mean, certainly this can backfire, right? It's like, oh, I'm going to eat a pint of ice cream and I'm not going to judge myself because it's so good for me. Everything in moderation, right? But practicing non-judgment, it's like, it's great, have some ice cream. It's summertime. It's probably the only time of year when we're most able to digest something cold that's also cooling in nature, like a dairy product. So yeah, non-judgment. And these are my two favorite intuitive eating practices. Deep breathing and putting your utensil down between bites. And many of you have heard me preach this many times before, and it's always helpful to me even to remind myself of that, because I find that actually still, despite knowing how valuable these tools are, many times I don't do either one of them. So by reminding you, I'm also reminding myself. I have little kids, and they are like wild animals sometimes at the table, especially when they get each other going. They're just like laughing hysterically. Maybe they're throwing food. They're totally on a different wavelength. And so I get distracted by them, and sometimes I don't remember to do those sorts of things. And especially in those kinds of situations, community eating, family eating that feels more chaotic, it's really important to do the breathing, to put the utensil down, feel what it feels like to chew food. Because if not, sometimes I leave the table thinking, what happened? Did I even eat anything? I don't remember, right? So I think these practices can be really helpful. And yeah, just again, a reminder that in the end, your body is your teacher, and I may have some knowledge and some tools to share. And it's all about tapping in to the messages that you're getting for nourishment. And really, breath is our first source of nourishment, right? When you feel like you need to put something in your mouth, first exhale and give something out to the world, to the trees, to the earth, and then see how you're feeling. And it may be that the nourishment that you need isn't food, It may be a walk. It may be connecting with somebody. It may be drinking water, listening to a song, reading something, drawing, writing. Think about all of the different tools in your personal toolkit that help you to feel nourished. And one of the real foundations of ancestral eating is storytelling, telling the stories of our ancestry, gathering those stories from family members, sharing them with each other so that we all start to learn more about each other and start to build more tolerance and more understanding. That's so deeply needed in human culture right now, in humanity, is this deeper level of connection and of understanding. And I love connecting and uniting around something that is the same for all of us. which is food, right? And where it came from. So I really encourage you to keep exploring those stories, and understanding who you are and better understanding who your friends and community and loved ones are as well. It's a beautiful thing. And yeah, always encourage you to share your story, because that is so valuable and that is how we learn. And because we all have bodies and we all eat food and we all go through these processes of illness and healing, of feeling out of balance and then getting back into balance, we all have knowledge and we all have wisdom to share. So yeah, I always encourage folks to share stories, and I'm always happy to hear from you, even if you ever want to send me a line and tell me a little bit about your own personal story or about your own ancestry. That's how I learn, is by hearing from you. So I always appreciate it. And yeah, just to summarize, find these simple ways to detoxify and promote your body's own natural capacity to heal, like lemon and seaweed, and support your innate immunity with soluble fiber and probiotics. Simplify the foods that are processed with ingredients you can't pronounce or don't understand. And bring in these ancestral foods and practice intuitive eating. Because I think that these are really incredible foundational tools, that we can all be tapping into and likely will want to keep tapping into time and time again, as things change. So thank you all so much for listening. And Krista, I want to hear a little bit more about your question around tea, if you'd like to share. And Rich, thanks for sharing that link.
Just wondering, well, then you went into the lemon water, but what particular teas? I forget where you mentioned them in the, between meals, the between meal teas, particular flavors, herbal, which.
Great question. Tea is going to be different for everybody, depending on what's going on. And I think some teas that help us adapt to stress and changes in life that can be really supportive to anybody are teas like Tulsi, right? Sacred basil. I think that's a wonderful kind of tea to start with. Even a blend that has Tulsi and rose in it. I also think that other teas that support the nervous system, like lemon balm, which is supportive to digestion, supportive to the nerves, and antiviral. That's another really lovely one. A tea that is very mineral rich, and great for flushing the lymphatic system, helping the body detoxify, is nettle tea. Nettles are flourishing everywhere right now. They do sting. They do sting, pardon me. So when you're harvesting them, be aware of that. But I think those are three great ones to kind of think about exploring and starting with.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for asking. Christy, go ahead.
I have a question about drinking during your meal. I seem to get a memory from our last class that you were suggesting not drinking while you're eating your meal.
That's right.
And I've tried to do that. I find it really hard because I think my habit, one way of pausing between bites of food for me is to have a sip of water or wine. I wanted to ask you about wine. But did I remember that correctly? Are you suggesting that we should not include water or liquids during our time we're actually eating?
Thank you for asking. That's such a good question. Yeah, and so Ayurveda talks about the fact that liquids during meals dilute gastric secretions, which makes sense, right? Our liver recycles all of our bile and kind of stores it and hangs on to it until the pancreas says, hey, liver, it's time to digest some food. And the liver says, okay, here you go, here's your bile, right? And bile, if you've ever vomited, which probably most of us have, you know, is very, very bitter, acidic, burning, extremely strong stuff. And it needs to be strong to create this chyme in the stomach, this kind of mixture of bile and food that then goes into the small intestine to be absorbed. So liquids dilute the bile, right? That's what's going on. So it's not ideal to dilute our bile because it means we don't really get that good chyme going, which then means we don't assimilate nutrients as well. That being said, drinking a glass of water 30 minutes before a meal really supports our body's own natural capacity to digest because it hydrates all of the cells, the epithelial cells that line our stomach, so that they can better take in bile from the bile duct, from the liver, to break down our food. So that's really technical, but I would suggest that if you do want to break that habit or, you know, let's say change or shift that habit, you could kind of focus on, okay, I'm going to drink a big glass of water 30 minutes before my meal while I'm cooking or, you know, whatever makes sense. And then you may not feel as thirsty because you've sort of primed your stomach for digestion. And I think that you're probably not thirsty while you're eating.
Mm.
And likely it is a habit. Try that out and see. You
Okay.
know, try drinking water, a big glass 30 minutes before a meal, eating without water, and then after the meal, it's like, am I dying of thirst? You know, just notice, just sort of pay attention to that.
Uh-huh.
And it may be that you need a little bit of water with your meal, but not a ton. Probably not as much as you're drinking. A lot of people will ask me too, like, oh, I'm taking these supplements with food. How do I manage that? And again, it's like a few sips of water before a meal, not a big deal. It's more about, you know, chugging glasses of water while we're eating. Wine is a little different because wine has sort of that acidic quality to it. It does actually, certainly it's a liquid, so it does dilute bile to some extent. However, wine eaten with a meal is fairly well metabolized and contributes to that acidic environment that's in the stomach. Actually, some traditional cultures recommend for low stomach acid drinking a small glass, a couple ounces of red wine with a meal. Many of you have heard me say, do apple cider vinegar for low stomach acid, kind of the same concept, right? I don't, you know, necessarily use wine as one of my healthcare recommendations, but I also think wine is a wonderful food and it's a fermented food, right? And it's traditional to many different cultures. And it can be used medicinally for sure. I studied with a healer and a herbalist from Guatemala, Ms. Beatriz, for many years. And she made all of her tinctures, her medicinal herbal extracts, not in vodka or grain alcohol, but in red wine. And that was amazing to me. And it was like, you know, just adding this extra medicinal layer to her extracts. So I thought that was really neat. Thanks for asking.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah. And Melissa, you were asking about date sugar. As sweeteners go, dates are really sweet. And they're so delicious. And one of the great things about dates is that they're also high in fiber. So they're not causing as much of a blood sugar spike and crash as other sweets. Date sugar is most often made from dried dates because, again, it's made commercially. So it's hard to process that many dates and keep them from spoiling when they're fresh. So that means that the sugars are that much more concentrated. And I would say, check out how you relate to it or how your kids relate to it as a sweetener. Is it making them feel cuckoo, or are they tolerating it okay? I think that's a kind of like an intuitive um, check it out and see sort of thing. And with any sweetener, I would suggest, having protein with your sweetener, which is why for people who tolerate nuts and seeds, adding some almond flour or some flaxseed meal or some other kinds of nuts and seeds to baked goods that you're making is a great way to kind of slow down their metabolism with that protein and fiber. And yeah, I love dates. It's a great question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My sister-in-law just started making amazing chocolates with date sugar that I like can't resist. So I was just curious how much healthier for me they are.
So good. Again, I think it's like the cacao, amazing antioxidant fermented food, and the dates, delicious, satisfy that sweetness, really high in minerals that are calming and soothing, and high in fiber. So both of these are amazing foods and super concentrated, high intensity foods. So I think it's great, and a little goes a long way. What else? Other thoughts, questions? Go ahead.
Here we go.
Yeah, hi, I was actually in Palestine 2 years ago in the West Bank with a group from St. Mike's. And it was wonderful to, first of all, have all their vegetables and wonderful, cooking hummus and falafel. But we also had fresh dates, and that was delicious to have them, right off the palm trees. And in the Quran, when Mary gave birth to Jesus, because they have that story, she was holding on to a date tree.
Wow, amazing. Amazing. They are incredible, incredible foods. Thank you, Melissa. So nice to see you. See you soon.
What time is it?
What else? Other final questions before we close? So wonderful to have you all here today.
I have a question. Are most people that are on this, in this group now, a member of your academy? Or is everybody new? Do you know?
I would say about 75% of us are part of the academy. And there are some new folks as well, which is so fun.
Can you speak about the academy a little more?
Yeah, of course. So it is our monthly membership community. And we have new moon classes like these, and then we have full moon conversations where we do kind of have a general topic and folks can bring their questions and we can explore those questions. And then members get access to a lot of different information, like a resource library, which is basically me taking the vast amount of information that I read and research about and putting it in one place for you to explore. I also offer this opportunity for folks to get 20 to 30% off of any supplements or vitamins that they like to have through my online dispensary, so people can get access to that as well. And then I do guide spring and fall gut resets, and people can get kind of a discounted version of those to again kind of go through this process of simplifying, resetting, supporting our body's own healing capacity as we transition into different seasons. And here, I can even put this link in the chat, but you can go onto my website and take a look and learn a little bit more about it. And it's $19 a month to be part of the academy.
And
And
where
I'd
is the
love
link? Oh,
to-
there it is.
There
Yeah,
it is.
Harmon.
Thank you for asking. Um,
Is this time of year too late for the spring gut reset? Because I
Yep.
saw that and I rather do it after I get done with teaching.
That's right. Yes, and it is. We'll do it in the fall again.
Oh, so now it's too late.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
Did it this year again.
I did want to answer
Did it 2
Courtney's
years ago.
question about chocolate. And I love that you have Swiss ancestry. Yes. And the Swiss love their chocolate, and chocolate is not indigenous to anywhere near Switzerland. Right? The cacao plant really thrives in Ecuador. And interestingly, because the African and South American land masses once were united, cacao also thrives in parts of Africa. So I think it may not necessarily be your ancestral food. I don't know about your full ancestry. You should check that out and see if you have strands from those places where cacao is indigenous. And I think chocolate is an amazing food. And as I was saying before with Melissa's question about date sugar, it's highly concentrated. And with any concentrated, nutrient dense, fermented food, a little goes a long way. So I think really the thing that's not so great about chocolate is that it does tend to be mixed with processed sugar. But there are a ton of brands out there like Hu, like Honey Mamas, that are made with natural sweeteners like coconut sugar. And you can make your own. Actually, on my website, I have a ton of recipes for homemade chocolate. That's really good. And that's a fun project. And it's really only 3 or 4 ingredients: cacao powder, cocoa butter, you know, maple syrup or some kind of sweetener, and then any salt and spices that you like. So yeah, thank you. Thanks for asking that question.
I have to, I'm making this banana ice cream. Do you ever make ice cream with banana?
Yes,
With,
it's so
with
good.
a 1/4 cup of cocoa powder? Just
Oh, I've
plain
never
cocoa
done it
powder
with
in
that.
Just quickly, I'll tell you this, it's so yummy, and I won't take any of your time because you're too valuable. You take 4 bananas and freeze them. Okay, and then you take the bananas out, you let them thaw a little bit, peel them and chunk them up, put them in a food processor with a 1/4 cup of cocoa, plain cocoa, and couple tablespoons of almond butter, and then a little bit of like almond milk or whatever you want, and blend it up. It's unbelievable. It's like having a
Amazing.
chocolate banana fudgicle of your
Thank you
dreams.
so much for
Just
sharing
that's
that.
it. That's it. Try it. I couldn't believe it.
Sounds
But let
great.
the bananas thaw a little bit before you, maybe I'll come and join your group. I mean, I could just really get into this.
Great. Yes, we would love
Anyway,
that.
sorry, but I just had to tell you that.
Thank you. I always appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Can I ask a quick logistical question, Lisa?
Go for it,
Do
Christy.
you already know when the next class is going to be? It's getting to that busy summer, and I just want to get it in my schedule.
Get it in your calendar. Yeah.
If you don't know ahead, that's fine.
I don't know in this moment, but I can let you know
Great.
over the next couple of days. Thank you, Trisha.
It's not a rush, but just in that planning ahead department.
Definitely. I
Great.
totally get it. And yeah, I'd be happy to let you know.
Great. Okay. Thanks again. This is great. I love being
Yes.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
Thank you all for being here. Nice to see you.